Hi, in this video we're going to go over variables in Delphi. So we're going to go ahead and grab our button and label like we normally do. And one thing that I wanted to point out while we're doing this is Delphi actually uses a programming language called Pascal. And Pascal was created as a teaching language. And so as a teaching language, it really enforces or makes you do things in a certain way. It's trying to teach you the correct behavior. So, there are good things about that. You're going to write clean code. And the bad thing is it's going to force you to write kind of clean code. It's going to force you to do things in a certain way. So we have our button and our label. We're going to use the label to store our text. When we double click on the button, this takes us to the procedure or function, as you may have heard them in the past, for this button. We'll go over the distinction of these two in a different video. But in any case, when you click on any button, you expect something to happen, some action. So this procedure stores the code for that action. Now, for a variable specifically, what they do is store things. And so think of it as a place to store stuff. So I could have let's say, when I come in, I may have a place to store my keys. I may have a coat closet where I store my closet. I may have a garage where I store or park my car. And the key here is that they're different sizes and they have different purposes. And you just want to keep that in mind. So to give an example, I would never park my car in my coat closet, right? Because that's going to wreak havoc. And the same thing happens in the computer world. And I would never store my keys in my garage and leave my car parked outside because that's a waste of space. So you have to pick the right variable for what you're doing. You don't want the actual stuff that you store in the variable to be too big or too small. So with that, now Pascal has a couple different ways to create variables. So this is our page, and a lot of this code was, actually all this code was generated by Delphi. When we drag and drop components, it writes code in the background. And so this is the top of the page, and you're going to see this var. So this is a place to store variables. So let's go ahead and create one here. Let's create an integer. An integer is just a number. And we have just created our first variable. And so this number it does not contain decimals. So like 1, 2, 3, it can be -1, -2, -3. You get the picture here. So it can store information like that. Now, there are two places to store it, like I said. The var, which is underneath the page here, the first one, or in the procedure. And so what I mean by that is if we go to the design view, we can have variables that are just used for this button, right? So let's go ahead and create another one. So we have button 1 and button 2. If I go here, let's create a variable for this button. So this is our begin and end. This is where it expects the code to be. So to put a local variable here, we're going to go var, and let's call this I2. Okay, and we've just created a second button. Now we want the procedure for the other button to show up as well. So let's go back to design. We click on this, and it creates the code for us, right? So let's call this one, let's create a var section. And this is what I mean by it forcing you to do things in a certain way, because it's trying to get you in the habit of putting things in this organized manner. If this were C, C++, PHP, you can create variables anywhere you want. So Pascal, Delphi are not like that. Now the key here is that I can use I in either of these two buttons for this code. I can use I2 only for button 1, right? And I can use I3 only for button 2. So in button 2, I can use the global variable, which is I, or I can use I3. But this one is out of scope. This button does not recognize the code inside this procedure. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, again, like I said, we have different types of variables. We have the coat closet, we have the place for the keys, and we have the garage. So an integer is a place to store numbers. So if I wanted to do something with decimals, then I can say, all right, D, and we're just going to use a real here. There are a lot of different types, but we're going to use this for now. And so this one can store like 1.2, 3.4, and negative numbers, and so on and so forth. Then another one we may want to use would be to store text. So we created hello world in our last video. Let's do this. Let's call this a string. Okay. Now the important thing to note is that we are declaring the variable. We're creating the space for the variables right up here, but nothing is inside those variables. So we can go to our code for the button, and we can say string equals, this colon equals is the equal sign for Pascal, and we can say hello there. And as we did in the hello world, let's say we want that to show up on the label. So label 1, let's put it in the text. There we go. Oh, and we need to tell it to what to show. So let's show hello there. So when we run this, it's going to ask us to save the project. Oh. Okay. And we click on button 1, and there we go. Now, let's say that we wanted to show our number. So let's change this. Let's give I a number. And if we were to put I in here, let's see what happens. So we've got some errors. So what it's saying is that they're incompatible types, integer and string. So like we said, if a variable is a place to store something, if I, which is an integer, where our coat closet, it stores a little bit of stuff, then S is our garage, and it stores a lot of stuff. And so when you come down here, this text field is expecting a garage, and we're giving it something else. We actually need to do a conversion. We need to take what is a integer, a number, and convert that to a string. So there's a really easy way to do this. This is an integer. And these parentheses means that we're calling a function, much like a function or a procedure. Much like our button here, when the button is called, this is the function. It's actually a procedure we're creating to do this. And so there is a pre-built procedure to take a number and convert it to a string. So let's go ahead and run this, see what happens. There we go. So now we can convert something from a number to a string. Just as an example, if you wanted to take a string, let's say that we had a text box, and we'll put it over here, and you're expecting somebody to put a number in there. Now when they do that, from a code perspective, this would be edit 1, we could get the text, and let's say that you wanted to add those two numbers. So what we need to do is, since it's actually stored as text, I mean it tells us right here, we need to convert that to, in our case, let's say it's an integer. So we'll say string to int. And now we can take text from a text box and convert that into an integer. So this is another way to do that. Now when we go, if we want to show the real number here, and this is called casting, where you're converting one from one to another. So let's say that we put, let's comment this out. So we have it, and we'll keep that as a comment. But let's say that we wanted this to be the real number. So this one has decimal places, so this one's different. If we try to show this, Yeah, so now we're saying it can't convert between a real and a string. So this is where we're going to get into a little funny notation. So since a real number has a decimal place, one or more, it can have, n number of numbers there. What we have to do is we have to tell it to format it. And this is a floating point. That decimal point, it could be 1 places or 100 places. So let's go format float. And we're going to show it how to format it. So I'm going to say, put a comma, for thousands. We're going to show the decimal place, and we'll do this. And then what we're going to do is we want to feed it our number, D, and let's close this parenthesis right there. So when we run this, oh, we still got an error. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I forgot to put a comma. So we have to separate our elements here. So we're saying this is how we want you to store, or how we want you to show the number, and this is the actual number. So the software doesn't know when you're stopping these two, when you're changing from the format to the actual number. So this is we're calling this procedure or function, and it takes 2 parameters. So again, we're showing it what we want it to look like. That's parameter 1, and then we're feeding it the actual number. That's parameter 2. So when we run this, let's see what happens. There we go. So when we click button 1, you know what? Let's see what happened. D. We never assigned a value to D, so it's shown as blank. So let's give D a value. Okay, and this is what programming is. It's really back and forth, trying to sort out things. We're going to get into breaking down logic in the next one. We're going to start building actually a bigger program. So let's do this. Now that we created the space, we put something in the space. Let's run it. Okay, there we have our number. So we have that, and we're good to go. We've talked about converting an integer to a string. We've talked about converting a string to an integer, and then we've created a real number, and we've made it show up as a certain formatted string. So this will give us the baseline. In the next video, we're going to start talking more about looping, for loops, and we're going to use this as our basis. So we'll see you then.